This story is a work of fiction, inspired by real events. Names, dates, locations, and identifying details have been changed or dramatized to protect privacy and enhance the narrative. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental or used fictitiously. This content is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. It does not aim to glorify crime, promote violence, or pass judgment on real individuals. Viewer discretion is advised. Some scenes may contain mature, disturbing, or triggering content. What you are about to watch could have happened anywhere, to anyone. It's inspired by real events. Whispers of truth, buried beneath layers of fiction. We've changed the names, the dates, the locations, but the emotions, the betrayal, the fear, those are real. This story is not meant to accuse, only to reveal, to make you question, who do you really trust? If stories like this keep you thinking, long after they end, hit subscribe, smash like, and drop your theory in the comments. Now watch closely, before the truth disappears again.
It was 9:17 p.m. on a Thursday when the dispatcher picked up the call. On the other end, a woman's voice broke through the static, fast, uneven, repeating the same line twice as if saying it louder would make it true. My boyfriend's missing, my boyfriend's missing. She insisted he would never just vanish. He always came home. He always called. Outside, the street looked untouched. A porch light burned steady above a door. A neighbor carried in groceries, barely noticing the patrol car easing to a stop. To most, it was an ordinary night. To the officers stepping out of their cruiser, it was a night already split in two, before the call, and after it. They walked the path to the house, noting the details. His car was parked in the driveway. No broken windows. No forced door. Still, something was wrong. The air inside felt heavy, the kind of weight that lingers when someone should be there, but isn't. The clock ticked past 9:30, then 9:40. Each minute stretched, each question met with silence. Friends said he was dependable. Family said he was steady. Tonight, that steadiness had been shattered, and the pieces didn't fit. The officers paused in the doorway, listening, as if the house might answer for itself. The night had only just begun, but already the quiet was louder than anything else. And soon, the only question that mattered would hang in the air like smoke: where had he gone, and why? His name was Michael Turner. 33 years old, a construction worker who came home most nights with sawdust in his hair and the smell of concrete still clinging to his clothes. He wasn't flashy, and he wasn't loud. Neighbors said he was the kind of man who waved even when he was tired, the kind who stacked his tools neatly before he ever sat down to eat. His porch light always clicked on at sunset, and most nights you could see him out front, boots unlaced, sipping a soda before heading inside. Michael's world was built on small, dependable routines. A leather wallet, cracked and worn, that his father gave him when he turned 18. A pocket-sized prayer book tucked in the glove box of his truck, pages curled from years of use. His sister remembered how he bent down to check her kids' bike helmets, snapping the straps snug before letting them ride away. To his friends, he was steady, the one who answered late-night calls, the one who showed up when a move needed muscle, the one you could count on even when no one else came through. But steadiness didn't mean life was easy. The last few weeks told a different story. Overdue bills stacked crooked on the fridge, phone alerts chiming with payment reminders. Arguments at home that carried past midnight, muffled through the thin walls. He brushed it off when asked, working longer hours, pushing forward with that quiet persistence that had carried him for years. Still, the cracks were there, small and spreading. That was Michael. Ordinary, careful, constant. And it was that very constancy that made the night he went missing so unsettling. Because on the evening his world collapsed, the porch light still came on, the car still sat in the driveway, the soda can still on the counter, everything in place, except for him. The night began without warning of what was to come. At 7:12 p.m., Michael texted his sister a short note, tell the boys good night. Just 3 words, but they were part of a pattern, his way of staying connected. At 7:47, his smartwatch registered steps in the kitchen, pacing, back and forth, as if something was on his mind. At 8:05, the thermostat dropped by 2 degrees, a manual adjustment logged in the system. By 8:19, a neighbor heard music drifting faintly through his windows, the same playlist he often put on after dinner. And then, silence. No more messages. No more movements. The devices went still, as though someone had cut the thread of his evening routine. At 9:17, the 911 call came. His girlfriend told dispatchers he was missing. She said she was worried. She repeated herself more than once, her voice tight, clipped, as though rehearsing the same line. Patrol units were dispatched, rolling quietly into the neighborhood just after 9:30. A single cruiser slowed in front of Michael's house. To the casual eye, nothing was wrong. His truck sat in the driveway. The porch light glowed steadily. Curtains were drawn. A rookie officer leaned forward in his seat and muttered, "Looks routine." But the veteran beside him shook his head. Too neat, too still. They stepped inside. At first glance, the house seemed untouched. A muted newscast played across the television. A soda can rested on the counter, still beaded with condensation. His boots sat neatly by the door, dust clinging to their seams. These details, small on their own, were too exact together. Something didn't fit. The air inside was heavy, the kind of weight you feel but can't name. By 10:15, the forensic team was on scene. Their light swept the hallway, catching what the naked eye couldn't. Faint stains dotted the floorboards near the back hall, tiny spots of blood, wiped once, smeared faintly into the grain. In the bathroom, the mirror had been wiped down unevenly, streaks catching the beam of a flashlight. A damp towel lay crumpled on the tile, heavier than it should have been. In the kitchen, a chair jutted out awkwardly, angled as though it had been shoved aside in haste. Each item was logged, photographed, bagged. The picture was shifting, slowly, painfully, away from the story of a man who had simply walked out. Neighbors offered fragments. One said a dark sedan idled at the end of the street around 8:30, its headlights off, the glow of a cigarette visible in the driver's seat. Another remembered hearing hurried footsteps by the side gate, but thought nothing of it at the time. A third swore they saw Michael standing by his window just after 8, phone in hand, as if waiting for someone who never arrived. None of it was enough on its own, but together it began to color the night in darker shades. By midnight, detectives knew the call wasn't about a man who had decided to leave. The soda can, the boots, the porch light, the blinds drawn tight, each routine piece of his life remained, perfectly in place. But the order masked something else. Something deliberate. Accidents tell one story. This house told another. In the first 48 hours, detectives pushed every possibility that didn't point inward. The family clung to the hope that Michael had been swept up by something outside his control. The neighborhood whispered theories. A stranger. A prowler. A burglary gone wrong. The dark sedan was the first thread. Neighbors spoke of it idling near the corner, lights off, smoke curling from the driver's seat. Investigators scoured traffic cameras, ran plates, combed through hours of footage. The car dissolved into nothing, no record, no driver, no trace. It was as if the street had swallowed it whole. The prowler theory followed. A neighbor recalled hurried footsteps near the side gate. Detectives measured every hinge and latch, ran hands across the locks. No scratches. No damage. The soil beneath the fence was smooth, untouched. The memory collapsed under its own weight, another dead end. Then burglary. A theory so familiar it almost felt safe. Yet the scene mocked it. Drawers were neat. His wallet still on the dresser. Watch untouched. Even his prayer book, tucked inside the truck's glove box, hadn't been moved. Burglars left chaos. This was something else entirely. Each theory crumbled, one after another, and with them the family's last thread of comfort. His sister, sitting by her phone, admitted something she had never thought important until now. Weeks earlier, Michael had confessed he worried about the house, that the locks weren't enough, that someone close to him knew the codes. She'd brushed it aside. Now, those words pressed like a warning from the grave. The hunt for shadows at the edge of the street was over. The searchlight was turning inward. And when detectives looked closer, the person crying out for help was no longer beyond suspicion. When Michael's body was laid out on the steel table, the silence inside the county morgue carried its own weight. The pathologist moved slowly, eyes tracing what the skin already whispered. Along his wrists, faint ligature marks suggested restraint, not deep, but deliberate. Bruises across his chest and forearms showed the pressure of a struggle. A single fracture along his jaw told of a blow that landed hard, enough to stagger him. Lividity confirmed he hadn't been moved for hours, his body left to settle where it fell. The examiner paused, dictating each detail in a steady voice, before adding the words that anchored everything: this was not an accident. Toxicology results cleared the fog of speculation. No alcohol. No drugs. Nothing in his system to explain collapse or confusion. What remained was violence, plain and purposeful. At the house, forensic technicians worked as though reading from the same grim script. Their lights revealed smears of blood along the hallway floorboards, wiped in a hurried attempt to erase. In the bathroom, a mirror streaked unevenly, a towel damp and heavy in the corner. On the counter, fingerprints overlapped, Michael's beneath, another set smeared across his, as though one hand had tried to cover the other. But the discovery that silenced the room came from the living room sofa. Wedged deep between the cushions was a strand of long, dark hair. Not Michael's. Bagged, sealed, logged. It was the kind of evidence that didn't just hint, it spoke. And it spoke louder still when compared with the first statement given by the woman who called 911. She had insisted she never sat on that sofa, never touched it that night. Yet the hair was there, preserved by chance in the stillness of the room. A contradiction no one could ignore. For the family, the news broke them in a different way. His sister sat in the corner of the briefing room, gripping the small prayer book from his truck so tightly the leather bent beneath her fingers. She asked the question no one wanted to answer, so it was someone inside. Detectives shifted in their seats, unwilling to look her in the eye. Science had stripped the night of its shadows. The struggle was written into his skin. The cover-up was etched into the house itself. And now, suspicion was no longer faceless. Evidence had narrowed its aim. Science had turned suspicion into accusation. When detectives brought her in, the woman who had organized the search party entered the interrogation room with composure that felt practiced. She crossed her legs, folded her hands, and spoke with the same tone she had used on the 911 call. "He never just disappears," she said again and again, as if repetition might smooth over the questions pressing against her story. But detectives weren't listening to the words, they were listening to the rhythm. Each answer landed too neatly, too memorized. The man investigators believed had helped her crack sooner. At first, he tried humor, nervous chuckles filling the silence. But when questions circled back, he stumbled. He claimed he had arrived at 8:30, then moments later shifted it to just before 9. When asked about his clothes that night, he gave 3 different descriptions in less than an hour. Detectives wrote it all down. Small contradictions can break a wall faster than shouting ever could. Indictments followed. Murder. Obstruction. Tampering with evidence. The charges were read with the flat authority of law, yet the words landed like thunder in a neighborhood still reeling. Some of the very people who had searched beside her now stood outside the courthouse, whispering in disbelief that she could have led them with such a steady face while hiding so much. The first hearing filled every seat in the courtroom. Prosecutors laid out the case in precise steps: the bruises, the blood, the layered fingerprints, the foreign hair pressed between sofa cushions. The house itself, one attorney said, was a witness. The defense countered swiftly, pointing out a partial print that was smudged beyond certainty, questioning whether evidence had been mishandled in the sweep. They leaned on technicalities, urging the court to see doubt where the prosecution painted certainty. From the gallery, Michael's family sat in silence. His sister held his prayer book in her lap, lips moving in quiet prayer, but her eyes never left the woman at the defense table. She gripped the leather so tightly the edges bent under her fingers, as if holding on to it might anchor her through the storm. When the session ended, the judge confirmed charges and set trial dates. The evidence was no longer just paper in a file. Soon, 12 strangers would be asked to decide whose story it truly belonged to. The trial opened with a tension that was almost physical. The prosecutor stood before the jury and laid out what he called a staircase of evidence. Each step, he promised, would carry them from Michael's final text to the undeniable truth of who killed him. He began with the ordinary: the soda can on the counter, the thermostat lowered, the boots by the door. Then came the extraordinary: bruises on Michael's body, fingerprints layered over his own, a strand of hair hidden in the sofa cushions. "These are not accidents," he said, his voice steady but sharp. "These are choices." The defense answered with its own warning. They told the jury to beware of neat stories. Evidence bends, the attorney argued. Blood spreads unpredictably. Memories shift. Prints smudge. When the state fills in gaps with certainty, that's when you must step back and ask, do we really know? Their case was not to prove innocence but to plant doubt. The witnesses began. The medical examiner spoke first, describing Michael's injuries. With clinical restraint, the jaw fracture from a close-range blow, ligature marks around his wrists, bruising that mapped a struggle. Each word landed heavy, and Michael's mother in the gallery bowed her head, a tissue clenched so tightly it tore in her fist. Next came the digital analyst. Step counts, thermostat logs, device activity, they built a timeline of Michael's last hour in quiet, methodical detail. The jurors leaned forward, following the minute-by-minute collapse of his routine. Then came the testimony that shifted the room. A forensic lab technician described how ultraviolet light revealed blood wiped into the floorboards, how luminol confirmed what scrubbing had tried to hide. But it was the hair that broke the silence. It was not Michael's, she said flatly. It was consistent with the defendant. For the first time, the jurors looked up from their notes, some exchanging glances. In the gallery, Michael's sister pressed his prayer book against her chest, eyes locked on the woman at the defense table. The defense fought hard to tear that moment down. They hammered at the partial fingerprint recovered from the kitchen counter, insisting it was too smudged to be definitive. They argued the hair could have been transferred innocently, carried in on clothing, left days earlier. They reminded the jury that neighbors' memories, a car idling, footsteps by the gate, were fragile, colored by fear. Doubt lives in details, the attorney pressed, voice rising. And there is doubt everywhere in this case. The jury's reactions became part of the story. One juror scribbled furiously every time the defense spoke. Another sat with arms crossed, expression unreadable. Others leaned forward whenever the prosecution returned to the evidence. The weight of each testimony pulled them in different directions, their silence louder than any verdict. Closing arguments sharpened the divide. The prosecutor returned to his staircase, urging them to see how every step connected, how each detail locked into the next. You cannot unsee the pattern, he told them. The defense countered with urgency, almost desperation. Patterns deceive, they warned. Coincidence can look like certainty. You are not here to connect dots, you are here to question them. When the final words faded, the jury was dismissed. The door closed behind them with a hollow thud. Hours passed. The courtroom sat in suspended breath, lawyers whispering, family members clutching each other, the accused staring fixedly at the table in front of her. And then, as evening shadows stretched across the floor, the jury foreperson re-entered, a folded slip of paper trembling in her hand. The jury filed back into the courtroom just after dusk, faces drawn tight, each one carrying the weight of hours behind closed doors. The foreperson gripped the folded slip of paper with both hands, her knuckles pale against the edges. No one moved. Michael's sister clutched his prayer book so tightly the leather bent in her fists. The defendant sat stiff, eyes locked on the judge, refusing to look anywhere else. The air felt stretched thin, as if even the walls were listening. The judge unfolded the slip, cleared his throat, and read aloud. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty." The word echoed once, twice, until it seemed to hang in the room like a bell. Guilty. The reaction split the room. Michael's mother broke, her cries raw, her shoulders folding as though her body could no longer carry the grief. His father sat stone still, a tear sliding down his cheek before he brushed it away in silence. His sister pressed the prayer book to her lips, whispering his name into her hands. At the defense table, the mask cracked. The woman who had led search parties and shed public tears blinked rapidly, lips trembling, but no words came. The man accused of helping her shifted in his seat, palms flat against the wood, eyes darting toward the exits as though escape might still exist. Then came the sentence. The judge leaned forward, voice steady, deliberate. Life imprisonment. Without the possibility of parole. Each word struck like a hammer. No chance. No reprieve. Only the long wait of years behind bars. Outside, the neighborhood began its own form of reckoning. Porch lights glowed across the block, a quiet tribute to Michael's nightly ritual. Flowers appeared on his doorstep, laid by neighbors who had once searched beside her, now shaken by the betrayal that had unfolded in plain sight. For detectives, closure came not in celebration but in reflection. Every fingerprint, every smear of blood, every strand of hair had spoken louder than denial. Evidence had carried Michael's voice into the courtroom when he could not. And in the end, when the verdict was read, it was not only the jury's voice that answered. It was Michael Turner's. If this story moved you, subscribe for more true crime cases where justice had to fight its way through lies. And let us know in the comments, do you believe the evidence told the full story, or is there more still hidden in the shadows?